I am Valeria Mendez, born on March 17, 1989 in Cordoba, Argentina. And I once knelt in dark rooms taking spiritual assignments against believers who prayed at night. I am not sharing rumors or theories. I carried out rituals, spoke invocations, and targeted Christians whose faith threatened our altars. I watched demons respond to words, and I saw them retreat when certain confessions were spoken with authority. This is my warning, my regret, and my urgent alarm to you. Like this video now, comment without hesitation, share it with every believer you know, and do not you dare leave before the end, because what I am about to expose will uncover forbidden strategies the enemy never wanted you to know. The first confession that made demons run was this: I belong to Jesus Christ. I am sealed and untouchable. You think that sounds simple. It is not. When I was inside the occult, our assignments were never random. We were trained to study believers. We listened to their prayers. We monitored their speech. We waited for legal access. Demons look for permission, and permission often comes through identity confusion. The most vulnerable Christians were not the sinners. They were the uncertain. The ones who loved God but doubted their authority. The ones who worshipped on Sunday but questioned their belonging on Monday. When a believer did not understand who they were, we advanced. But when a believer stood in front of a mirror and declared, I belong to Jesus Christ, I am sealed and untouchable, something shifted in the spirit realm. I saw it. Assignments stalled. Spirits hesitated. Because identity closes doors. In our rituals, we were taught that a sealed believer is legally protected. The seal represents ownership. Ownership represents territory. And demons do not cross territory. They are not authorized to enter without resistance. When you confess belonging, you are not being emotional. You are establishing jurisdiction. There was a woman we targeted for months. She prayed constantly, but she was afraid. Fear kept her open. We infiltrated her dreams. We stirred anxiety in her home. We pressed her finances. But one night, after a sermon about spiritual authority, she changed her confession. She stopped begging. She started declaring, I belong to Jesus Christ. I am sealed. I am untouchable. The atmosphere around her house changed. Our monitoring rituals failed. Dream intrusions stopped. The spirits assigned to her reported resistance. That was the word they used. Resistance. You must understand something. Demons do not respond to volume. They respond to authority. And authority flows from identity. When you confess that you belong to Christ, you are not informing heaven. Heaven already knows. You are reminding hell. And hell calculates risk. When a believer is unsure, hell advances. When a believer is confident in ownership, hell withdraws. This is why the enemy attacks your identity so aggressively. He whispers, you are not worthy. You are too flawed. You failed again. Because if he can detach you from belonging, he can gain access. In the occult, we celebrated Christians who spoke more about their sin than their redemption. Shame is access. Uncertainty is access. But sealing confessions close gates. When you wake up and declare, I belong to Jesus Christ, you are enforcing covenant. When you say, I am sealed and untouchable, you are invoking spiritual law. This is not motivational language. This is legal positioning. I remember a night when we gathered to perform a coordinated assignment against a church leader. The ritual was precise. The timing was calculated. But before the ritual completed, that man went live online and began speaking. Not begging, not panicking, declaring, I belong to Jesus. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. I am sealed. The atmosphere in our ritual room shifted. Candles flickered violently. One participant collapsed in panic. The lead practitioner stopped the ritual because resistance had increased beyond manageable levels. That was the first time I understood something terrifying. Demons are bold when you are silent. They retreat when you speak truth with certainty. You do not need to scream. You need to stand. You do not need special rituals. You need identity. And here is what most believers misunderstand. Confession is not about convincing God. It is about enforcing alignment. When your mouth agrees with your covenant, power moves. When your mouth contradicts your covenant, access opens. This is why daily confession matters, not occasionally, daily. The occult functions on repetition, so must your authority. You cannot declare belonging once and then spend the rest of the week speaking doubt. That inconsistency weakens enforcement. If you have been under strange attacks, sudden discouragement, unexplained pressure, I need you to examine your words. Are you declaring ownership, or are you negotiating with fear? The first daily confession that makes demons run is not complex theology. It is identity enforcement. Stand in your room, look at yourself, and declare, I belong to Jesus Christ. I am sealed and untouchable. Say it until your spirit agrees. Say it until fear leaves. Say it until doubt is silenced. Because I have seen what happens in the unseen realm and that confession is made. Assignments weaken. Monitoring spirits lose clarity. Access points close. This is not exaggeration. This is testimony. And I am telling you with urgency. If you want demons to hesitate before approaching your life, establish ownership daily. Do not whisper it. Do not question it. Declare it. Because the first thing the enemy checks before attacking is this: do you know who you are? If the answer is yes, many battles never begin. That is the first confession, and it terrifies the kingdom of darkness. The second confession that made demons run instantly was this: every curse spoken against me is broken and returns to nothing. Listen carefully. Occult words are never casual. Words are vehicles. They carry intention. They carry permission. They carry assignment. When we performed rituals, we did not rely on objects alone. We relied on spoken declarations. Because in the spirit realm, speech activates direction. Many believers do not understand this. They think curses only exist in extreme rituals. That is not true. Curses can be whispered in jealousy, spoken in anger, released in envy, pronounced in secret gatherings. And if there is no resistance, they travel. When I was inside, we targeted believers who were successful, rising, favored, especially those with influence, especially those who were generous, especially those who were bold. We would speak assignments over their health, their finances, their children. And then we would wait. We monitored patterns. We watched for cracks. But something always disrupted our expectations when a believer understood how to break curses daily. The moment they declared, every curse spoken against me is broken and returns to nothing, the atmosphere shifted. Let me explain why. In the occult, we were taught that spoken curses must find landing ground. They must attach to agreement. Agreement can be fear. Agreement can be repeated negative confession. Agreement can be ignorance. If a believer unknowingly agrees with a curse by saying, nothing ever works for me, that I always get attacked, that I am probably under something, that agreement strengthens the assignment. But when a believer forcefully declares, every curse spoken against me is broken and returns to nothing, they interrupt the landing process. It is like cutting a wire before the detonation completes. I remember a businesswoman we targeted. She had unusual favor. Doors opened quickly for her. We were assigned to slow her momentum, delay her contracts, disrupt her partnerships. The ritual was completed. The declarations were spoken. For 2 weeks, minor confusion entered her deals. Then one morning she posted something publicly. It was not dramatic, it was firm. Every curse spoken against my business is broken. What was sent returns to nothing. From that week forward, the delays reversed. Contracts accelerated. Unexpected investors appeared. Our monitoring attempts became distorted. Why? Because she did not negotiate. She broke it. You must understand something critical. Demons function through sustained pressure. They test consistency. If you break a curse once and then live in fear the next 6 days, the resistance weakens. But if daily you declare, every curse spoken against me is broken and returns to nothing, you establish a perimeter. And perimeters frustrate darkness. There was a night during one of our gatherings when a senior practitioner said something that shook me. She said, never waste energy on believers who know how to return curses. They are too expensive to attack. Too expensive. Do you hear that? It costs the enemy effort to fight someone who understands spiritual law. And returning a curse to nothing is not revenge. It is cancellation. You are not sending harm back. You are nullifying assignment. You are declaring that what was spoken has no authority. Many believers are attacked not because they lack faith, but because they lack enforcement. They pray, but they do not cancel. They worship, but they do not revoke. In the occult, revocation terrified us, because once a curse is revoked, it must collapse. It cannot hover indefinitely without agreement. This is why jealousy is dangerous. This is why gossip is spiritual warfare. This is why careless words matter. But here is the empowering truth. You do not need to know who spoke against you. You do not need to identify the source. You only need to declare cancellation. I remember the first time I heard a pastor boldly say during prayer, every curse spoken against this congregation is broken and returns to nothing. The ritual room I was in felt resistance immediately. The air became heavy. One of the participants complained of sudden nausea. Assignments became unstable because someone had enforced cancellation. Do not underestimate daily confession. Do not assume silence is humility. Silence can be vulnerability. If you have experienced unexplained cycles, repeated setbacks, strange relational conflicts, sudden financial blockages, I need you to respond with authority. Stand and declare, every curse spoken against me, my family, my finances, my health, is broken and returns to nothing. Say it calmly, say it firmly, say it daily, because the enemy tests repetition, and repetition of truth builds walls. This confession makes demons reconsider engagement, because they cannot attach where cancellation is constant. They cannot land where revocation is spoken. They cannot persist where authority is enforced. And I am telling you from experience, we avoided believers who practiced daily curse-breaking confessions, not because they were loud, but because they were consistent. Consistency builds spiritual immunity, and demons prefer easier targets. This second confession is not dramatic, it is strategic. Break it daily, cancel it daily, return it to nothing daily, and watch how many attacks dissolve before they fully form. That is what I saw. That is what we feared. The third confession that made demons run instantly was this: I close every open door and revoke every legal right the enemy claims over my life. This one terrified us the most, because it attacked our foundation. In the occult, everything operates on legal access, not emotion, not randomness. Access. We were trained to look for doors. Unforgiveness, habitual sin, unhealed trauma, secret bitterness, occult objects in homes, generational agreements. We did not force entry. We looked for invitations. Some invitations were obvious, some were subtle. But every attack required a door. When a believer prayed emotionally but never closed doors, we remained. When they worshiped but refused to forgive, we remained. When they fasted but held secret resentment, we remained. Doors do not have to be dramatic. Sometimes a door is a sentence spoken in anger. Sometimes a door is a vow made in pain. I will never trust again, that will always struggle, that deserve this suffering. Those words create agreements, and agreements create access. I remember a young man we were assigned to oppress with depression. He had no obvious sin. He was active in church, but he carried deep offense towards someone who betrayed him. He replayed it daily. He rehearsed it daily. That offense was a door. Our influence increased gradually, not overnight, gradually, because access was sustained. Then something changed. One night he prayed differently, not emotionally, legally. He said, I forgive, I release, I close every open door, I revoke every legal right the enemy claims over my life. I felt the shift, and I was not even physically near him. The assignment weakened instantly, because forgiveness is door closure. Revocation is eviction. You must understand something. Demons argue legality. If there is agreement, they remain. If there is unaddressed access, they persist. But when you explicitly declare, I close every open door and revoke every legal right, you are not begging, you are terminating contracts. That language matters. In occult rituals, we created contracts through words. So revocation through words dismantles them. Many believers pray for relief without revocation. They ask for peace without eviction. They request breakthrough without closing doors. And darkness exploits that gap. There was a woman whose household experienced constant tension, arguments without reason, restlessness at night, heavy atmosphere. We had been assigned to her home months prior, but the access point was simple: an object in her house tied to past involvement. She did not even realize its spiritual implication. One afternoon, she listened to a teaching about closing doors. She walked through her house praying, I close every open door. I revoke every legal right. She removed objects connected to past agreements. The environment shifted within days, because legal access had been addressed. This is not superstition. This is structure. Darkness respects structure, and so should you. You cannot claim authority while leaving doors open. You cannot demand freedom while defending offense. You cannot expect peace while nurturing secret agreements. Closing doors requires honesty. Revocation requires humility. And humility is powerful. When you admit, if there is any door I have opened knowingly or unknowingly, I close it now, you dismantle arguments. You neutralize claims. You reduce leverage. I remember one senior occult leader saying during a strategy meeting, believers who close doors regularly are the most frustrating. They do our work for a week and then undo it in one prayer. Do you understand the power of that? You can undo weeks of pressure in one legal declaration, but it must be specific. It must be intentional. It must be consistent. If you feel recurring patterns, if cycles keep repeating, if emotional triggers reappear, examine those. Ask boldly, is there unforgiveness? Is there agreement? Is there something I have not revoked? Then declare firmly, I close every open door and revoke every legal right the enemy claims over my life, my family, my future. Say it without fear. Say it without doubt. Because when doors close, assignments suffocate. When legal rights are revoked, demons must withdraw. They do not stay where claims are invalidated. They do not fight prolonged battles where access is denied. This confession shifts you from victim to enforcer. It moves you from reaction to authority. It places you in position. And I am telling you with urgency, many attacks continue not because they are powerful, but because doors remain unattended. Close them, revoke them, daily if necessary, and watch how pressure decreases. Because when legality collapses, influence collapses. This third confession dismantles the enemy's paperwork. And without paperwork, they have no case. The fourth confession that made demons run instantly was this: the blood of Jesus speaks for me, and I stand under divine authority. This one ended arguments completely. In the occult, we feared one thing above all: not noise, not emotional prayer, not religious activity. We feared representation, because representation determines outcome. When a believer stood alone in their own strength, we advanced. When a believer relied on emotion, we tested endurance. But when a believer declared that the blood of Jesus speaks for them, everything shifted, because now they were not representing themselves. They were invoking covenant authority, and covenant authority overrides accusation. You must understand how darkness operates. Demons accuse. They present evidence. They argue failure. They remind you of past mistakes. They amplify shame. Because accusation weakens confidence, and weakened confidence reduces enforcement. In rituals, we would rehearse the failures of a target. We would speak their past aloud. We would amplify their guilt. Why? Because guilt creates hesitation, and hesitation creates access. But when a believer declared, the blood of Jesus speaks for me, accusation lost momentum. Because the blood represents payment, it represents settlement, it represents finality. And you cannot accuse someone whose debt has already been paid. I remember one particular assignment against a worship leader. We had gathered significant evidence: past sins, moments of compromise, private struggles. We intended to trigger intense shame during a major event. Right before he stepped on stage, he prayed something simple but devastating: the blood of Jesus speaks for me. I stand under divine authority. The pressure we intended to release dissolved. He ministered with unusual clarity. No hesitation, no fear, because accusation had been silenced before activation. This confession is powerful because it does not depend on your perfection. It depends on covenant, and covenant outranks performance. In the occult, we thrived on performance-based believers. Those who believed their authority fluctuated with their behavior. If they failed, they withdrew. If they stumbled, they remained silent. Silence was opportunity. But covenant believers were different. Even after mistakes, they declared, the blood speaks for me. And that statement shut down legal claims. You must grasp this deeply. Divine authority is not emotional confidence. It is legal positioning. When you say, I stand under divine authority, you are declaring alignment with heaven's government. And government carries enforcement power. I witnessed rituals collapse because of this confession. One night, during a coordinated effort against a family experiencing breakthrough, the mother began praying audibly in her home. She was not shouting. She was firm. The blood of Jesus speaks for my household. We stand under divine authority. Within minutes, the atmosphere in our gathering destabilized. Two participants felt sudden fear. The ritual leader halted the session because authority had been invoked at a higher level. Darkness cannot override divine jurisdiction. It can only exploit unclaimed territory. This is why this confession must be daily, not occasional, daily. Because accusation is daily, pressure is daily, temptation is daily. So your declaration must be daily. When you wake up before doubt whispers, declare, the blood of Jesus speaks for me. When you sense guilt creeping in, declare, the blood speaks. When you feel unworthy, declare, I stand under divine authority. Not because you are flawless, but because covenant is intact. The enemy studies inconsistency. If you only speak authority when you feel strong, your resistance fluctuates. But if you speak it especially when you feel weak, your authority stabilizes. There was a time when I personally tested this after leaving the occult. Yes, Even after leaving, I experienced backlash, oppression attempts, night pressure, accusations in my thoughts. One night, instead of panicking, I stood and declared, "The blood of Jesus speaks for me. I stand under divine authority." The heaviness lifted immediately because representation changed. I was no longer standing in my history. I was standing in covenant. And covenant silences arguments. You must stop defending yourself in your own strength. Stop replaying past failures. Stop allowing shame to define your position. Declare representation. Declare covenant. Declare authority. Because demons cannot outargue the blood. They cannot override divine government. They cannot persist where higher authority is enforced. This fourth confession does not just repel, it dominates. It does not just protect, it establishes rule. If you combine all four confessions, daily identity, curse cancellation, door closure, covenant authority, you become legally fortified. And legally fortified believers are avoided. Darkness prefers easier territory. Do not be easier territory. Speak daily. Enforce daily. Stand daily. Because I have seen what makes demons hesitate. And this confession ends their argument completely. You have heard what the enemy fears most, and you cannot claim ignorance anymore. If you watched until this very end, you now carry knowledge that shifts atmospheres and closes doors permanently. Comment now and declare which confession you are enforcing starting today. Share this video immediately because silence empowers darkness, but exposure dismantles it. Do not forget what was revealed here, and do not reduce it to emotion. This is enforcement. Stand bold, speak daily, walk in authority. And remember, what you enforce consistently, darkness cannot withstand.